I'm Jim Holman, editor of the San Diego Reader. I'm speaking today with Anthony Davi, who is an expert on Little Italy here in San Diego. And we are talking about the stories that our writer at the Reader, Judith Moore, wrote about Frank Bompensiero, who was probably the most feared mafia man in Southern California. But lots of great ironies involving Bompensiero. One of the things we haven't talked about too much yet is the social context, the friends that Bompensiero and his wife Thelma made with other people in the business. Because not only did they do business, but they socialized. And let's see, who should we talk about first? The Adamos, maybe?
Let's talk about the Adamos. You know, Momo Adamo was the second in command to Jack Dragna
Up in L.A.
up in L.A. So eventually when Frank Bompensiero comes to San Diego, eventually Adamo is down here, and they're connected, and they socialize quite a bit.
Thelma, Frank Bompensiero's wife, and Maria Adamo, it seems to me they had a lot of parties they put on together, and Maria Adamo was quite beautiful. If you look at the pictures, she was quite charming and had a good personality, and was quite the hostess, as I recall.
Yeah.
Great china, great food. Now this is when they were up in L.A.
Yeah.
So they socialized up there in L.A., down here, and then you see a lot of pictures of the Adamos and the Dragnas and the Bompenseros down in Tijuana.
Yeah.
They're having dinner down across the border.
Everybody's dressed so well, too.
Yeah, and then
To the nines.
yes, and Judith talks a lot about their clothes, about how Marie wore silk underwear or whatever. And,
Yeah.
and Bompensiero himself and Adamo were very dapper. They had
Immaculate.
and I think Bompensiero had shirts made for custom made.
Yeah. Beautiful French cuffs.
Beautiful French cuffs, and
They could say his shoes was so polished with like a mirror.
And they wore the Homburg hats. I mean, these guys were dressed in a way that nobody dresses now.
Different world.
But due to several things, we don't know the whole story. There was a terrible ending, at least to Momo's life, because he was. Well, there's a theory that maybe he was unhappy that his wife had been raped by another mafia guy, Desimone. Desimone was a lawyer for the mafia up in L.A. And so there's a case where he ended his life. He shot himself in the head. He shot Marie in the head.
Right.
And they're out in Kensington, a very nice, peaceful part of San Diego.
Yeah.
And they're in their home there, where she had a lot of these beautiful parties. And he dies right away, I believe. Is that right?
He shoots her, and then he turns the gun on himself, so he commits suicide.
But the bullet rattles around in her brain.
Right.
Yeah.
She loses the eyesight in an eye, but she survives. Yeah. And she goes on to live and marry another.
Well, that's the great story. So Thelma, she has trouble with childbirth when she births Marianne, and I don't know how bad her health was, but she dies, I don't know, was it in the 50s maybe, or the 60s?
Yeah.
And then in the 70s, Bompensiero ends up marrying Marianne. Marie.
Yeah.
And how should we have known that happened? What did Marianne say, or Thelma say?
Thelma always said that Marie was a great flirt, and she said, if anything ever happens to me, Marie's going to come after you, Frank.
And what did Frank say at some point? And I think this is a quote from Marianne, that she was, you can't testify against your husband or something.
Right. And she knew the life.
She knew the life. Yeah, Marie knew the life. That's for sure. So the other thing I think it's important to say is that Marianne Bompensiero and Thelma's daughter, she talks about him as a father. He spoiled her. He never wanted to discipline her. And there was one scene where Thelma is, Marianne does something wrong, and she was chasing her with a broom or something. She wants to punish her, and Frank says, "Hit me, hit me." He was. That's the interesting thing about Bompensiero. Even though he was this famous hitman, and he, committed all these murders, at home, he was very faithful.
Yeah.
And in fact, he he did kill some guy who was cheating on his wife or was beating his wife.
Right.
Was that the some guy downtown? I thought, wow, some kind of justice. So that's what you'll find if you read these accounts of Bompensiero by Judith. A great amount of sympathy.
Yeah.
And pointing out all his good side.
He loved his wife and his family. He was, I mean, he used to lay on the couch and watch Lassie. I mean, he was a very complex figure, and the book does a good job of getting inside his head as best you can. Judith does.
Well, and one of the funny things is she sets the scene for his final killing, and of course we don't know
Yes.
who offed him, who shot him in the end, but he is shot in the phone booth at an Arco gas station on Lamont and Grand Street.
Right.
And
As he's making a phone call.
as he's making a phone call, he comes out and somebody shoots him there in the alley.
Yeah.
Now, see, I was under a mistaken impression because I lived right near that corner.
Really?
And I thought it was, because the police came to my apartment after the shooting and said, did I hear anything? And I didn't hear anything. But I imagined, I think this is just a false remembering, that I saw blood in the alley. I think,
Really?
now that I've read more accounts of it, I think that it was the alley below Thomas Street. I thought it was the alley between Grand and Thomas, but I think it was the alley below Thomas Street. Anyway, but he had walked up from the apartment that he and Marie, formerly Marie Adamo, were living in.
Yeah.
And maybe Judith imagines that maybe he was watching Lassie. He went up and made this phone call.
Right.
And some people say it was another mafia guy who was who suspected, I think probably rightly so, that Frank had become an informant for the FBI.
Right.
So
And that sealed his fate, perhaps.
maybe an interesting story. More to come. Thank you so much, Ed.